Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. I am your host, Megan Blessed, and today I honestly have such an incredible episode all around getting unstuck and really understanding what it means to really move through some really hard and confusing and difficult times in your life with my beautiful friend and colleague, Ethan Markert. He is such a joy. So I'm gonna keep this intro as short as I possibly can because honestly, the meat of this episode is just so good. But at the same time, we have so much energy going on this week. I do want to touch on it in a little bit. We have we have Cancer season, the summer solstice, and a full moon this week. So with all of this energy coming up, I am pouring so much support into the daily download, which is my free community where I drop in wisdom, channeled messages, oracle readings, astrology knowledge, all of that great stuff for free in my little Telegram channel that I have, which I'm absolutely loving. The girlies and my besties that are in there are absolutely loving it, and I cannot recommend it enough, especially this week. The theme all around celebrating yourself, celebrating how far you've come, especially as we head into this solstice and the full moon on Friday. It's really going to be a whole weekend affair. So I'm going to be dropping some solstice ceremonies, some journal prompts, and really just how to deepen into the energy of this full moon that we have on Friday. It's going to be so beautiful. So if you're not in there already, check the show notes, go in there. I can't tell you how beautiful it is to connect with everyone that's in there and just really receive all of this like practical, like a fun daily spiritual shit. Just like every single day. It's just so fun. So if you want the ceremonies, the rituals, all the things that you need to know around the solstice and the full moon that's happening this week, and then just like next week, we're going to dive a little bit more into Cancer season with my beautiful Cancerian guests, which I'm so excited about. But anyway, I cannot wait. We're going to dive super deep next week more into Cancer season. But if you want to be in the know while it is happening, head in the group. Seriously, it's so much fun. And then, of course, I always have my cosmic design sessions where I'm breaking down your astrology and human design to really help you understand how to really embody the energy that you are here to live, right? Breaking down the deconditioning from all of the stories, from all of the expectations that was on put onto us from everyone else, and really get you living and thriving as being exactly who you are here to be. Those are my cosmic design sessions. And then I just had a beautiful rewire and release session, my quantum healing work with a new client of mine. And those are so powerful when you are really ready to begin to actually like change your behaviors, really like lean into this deeper sense of healing and understand how we can actually bring and really learn how to feel through everything. And the more that we are able to feel, release, acknowledge, and no longer be scared, running, avoidant of these aspects of ourselves, the more freedom we actually have in our lives, the more at ease, the more fulfilled, the more at peace we truly are. I truly believe feeling is our way to healing. And so if you are ready to actually begin to rewire and reprogram your brain to actually like have you living as the embodiment of who you are here to be, those are the sessions for you. And then, of course, I always have my long-term one-on-one packages where we really dive into a full transformation journey, really bringing you from the girl who you thought you needed to be to the woman and the person that you are. It's just everything. We're going to dive into a lot more of that next week. But without further ado, I really want to bring you Ethan because he is so unbelievably incredible. And I'm just so excited to have y'all meet him and dive in because his message is so important. Ethan is the host of the Unstuck Podcast, a passion project he started in response to spending the majority of his 20s feeling stuck in life and struggling to find his purpose. He interviews thought leaders and experts every week to learn how they got unstuck in life and takes that information and shares it with his listeners in a very approachable way. He realizes that there aren't enough resources out there to help you find your purpose and believes that by sharing his journey of getting unstuck, he can help others start to get unstuck in life too. I was on Ethan's podcast and he is a long time. We've known each other for actually the last few years. He is so incredible, and it's so beautiful to just see him start to step into his purpose and in his light. Gosh, I can't freaking talk today. I think like Neptune is like squaring Mercury or something. And so the brain fog is just here. The words are not coming out. But either way, it doesn't matter because it's just, he is incredible. I cannot wait for you to meet him. Without further ado, here is this gem of a man. Hi, Ethan. Welcome to the show. I feel like this is like a cute little part two to like our episodes together because I was just on your podcast and now I'm so happy to have you here.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is my first time being a guest on somebody else's podcast, so I'm happy to be in the interviewee seat versus the interviewer seat.
Oh my gosh, I'm even more excited now. Oh my God, what an honor. Well, I'm so happy. I hope you like being in the interviewee. I know sometimes it can be a little, what do I want to say? It's like a different like it's a different vibe, but I'm so excited. Your story is so incredible and it's so important and I'm just so happy you're really stepping into this work and now you get to share your story here. So tell my audience just a little bit about you and, really like the era that I feel like you're stepping into when it comes to Unstuck.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on in the first place. So I have been on this journey, honestly, I want to say since I left college. I always knew that I was supposed to be doing something more with my life than just like being a business major working at a corporate job. And it's kind of followed me throughout my entire 20s. I always felt it in the background. I always knew that I wasn't supposed to be at a desk all day in and day out. And I always resonated really heavily with personal development, self-help resources, spirituality. And I've always felt this calling to provide something to the world versus, Excel models. But I struggled a lot over the years with knowing what form that should take. And I don't know if this is in my human design, but I got so caught up in details that I didn't even begin the process of starting to like figure out my purpose and my exact path, even though I knew I should be doing it, right? And so I got to about 27, 28, definitely my Saturn return. And I think that I started being asked by the universe and just the world in general to figure out like what's important to me and pursue that because my life wasn't moving forward in many aspects. It was literally hitting a ceiling or like a dead end. And so I think like what ultimately ensued and what happened is I got hit with a lot of really hard blows. And basically what happened is that my life was reflected back at me through a mirror. And it was basically, I think, the universe saying, do you like what you see? Do you want more of this or do you want something different? If you want more, you're going to have to change something because if you don't change anything, nothing different happens. And so I think I finally reached a point where, I literally turned 30 this year. And pretty much right after that happened, I basically got to a point where what I was doing was untenable. Like I couldn't do it anymore. I had to start taking the action to create the life that I want. So I started a podcast, which I had been talking about doing for years. I finally just did it one day. I got up and did it. And so I'm along for the journey. I would say that how it relates back to getting unstuck, and that's like the whole thing of my podcast, is I would say I spent all of my 20s feeling stuck in life. And now for the first time, it feels like things are kind of lining up and I'm getting to a place where I'm feeling more unstuck. I think it's a journey, but I know now that I'm at least on the path, or at least I'm at least at the trailhead of the journey. So it's a freeing feeling. It's scary, but at the same time, it's energizing, which I don't usually feel from things. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Oh, thank you. I absolutely love your story because for folks that, I mean, for folks here that don't know, Ethan and I knew each other in a past life. So we actually met when we were both working at Tinder together when I was in my EA life. And so again, meeting in a place where both of us actually, because also we were born the same year too. So really being in this place where we weren't as close yet. So like we were in the same place, but we didn't even know that we were both like going through this time of like really rediscovering ourselves. And your Saturn return is such an interesting time, which is why then of course I have my whole program on it because it truly like it just becomes this time of our life where we realize like how autopilot I feel like our 20s really starts to become. And I don't think we even really mean it to be that way, but it's like we just went through school and then did that and then just got a job because that's what we were supposed to do. And then all of a sudden we're like living in this world and it's like I feel like that's when the universe and like our Saturn return like rolls around. It's like, hey, like, do you actually like what you're doing and like how you're living and like the human that you are? Because like it doesn't seem like it. It's like, oh, like I didn't realize that, like, especially when I was moving through it, because I was really just in this, I was like, I just moved to LA and like this is just like what I'm just like here to do. Like I just got the job that I just was here to get. And like I had the friends and I was going out. Like I was very much more on like the social aspect. And I was like, I guess this is just like what life is like you get a job and I go out on the weekends with my friends and like this is just what life is until I kept getting like sicker and sicker and sicker.
Yeah, I
Did this
think we
move for
all
you?
totally. I think like we all get to this point in our 20s where we realize like, wait a second, am I living my life on the weekends? Am I like basically only getting what I wanted of life on the weekends? And if the answer is yes, then maybe there's an issue. Like maybe you have maybe you're not aligned. Do you know what I mean? But I think that's
Totally.
also what that feeling you mentioned of being on autopilot in your 20s is. To me, that's what being stuck is. You've
Mhm.
basically, you're kind of in the gutters of you're kind of like if you think about like your life as a bowling lane, like you're kind of stuck in the gutter right now. You're the ball, you're stuck in the gutter because you absorb these limiting beliefs over time about what you should be doing and how you should be spending your time, who you should be hanging out with. And if you haven't looked at those critically and dissolved them and made new ones for yourself, you wind up being on autopilot, like in the gutters of the bowling lane, just kind of like cruising down, not with any path in life, not any direction, like heading for
Mhm.
zero. And until you really reach a point where, and a lot of people don't reach this until their Saturn return. So it's kind of a nice thing when you think about it and you take a step back when you're basically being asked to figure out beliefs that are more aligned with what you want to be doing and figuring out a life path that's more aligned with your authentic self. So
Which is so interesting because I think, and I don't know if it's just like the way society is, because like we're in school and like we have our parents and we're like just indoctrinated into like this is like what we're here to do. And maybe it's not until our 20s when we're like in it for a minute and we're like, oh, wait, like, is this it for the rest of our life? Like, I'm just putting money in that 401k. Like,
yeah.
like this is it. Like, and so like your process of getting unstuck and really like when did you, I want to like dive deeper and like, peel back the layers of your story. Like when was that moment that you realize it's like, okay, like this is actually not what I want at all, especially as a manifester in human design, which is so special. Like you are just like not meant to be told what to do and like not meant to really like live by the rules that other people really indoctrinate to you. So like what was that moment for you and like how did you move yourself through this feeling of being on that autopilot to then actually coming back into your expression.
Well, I think what's sad about my story, and maybe people can take this as a cautionary tale, is that moment for me actually came probably after the first week of my first corporate job when I was 23 years old. I think I always knew from that moment, I was like, there's no way you're going to find me logging in and working at this job for the next, whatever, 40, 50 years. there's no way I can't do that. It's just not possible. But then I think what happened is like I became okay with it over time a little bit, where the distractions were serving their purpose. I was like going out on the weekends. I was traveling for work a little bit here and there. I was like being stimulated just enough at work where I could like be not bored from 9 a.m. to noon. And then there was lunch, and then sometimes there were happy hours. So I think that, and the money obviously helps. And so I think over time, I just kind of like continued weaving this web of a big problem, which is like I never fully addressed that initial feeling I felt when I was 23 that I shouldn't be doing this. In fact, I just buried it down a little bit more. And so I think, especially during COVID, whenever really all of the distractions were peeled away overnight, just having that reality of logging in every day to my Zoom and having the dumbest conversations you've ever heard in life with my corporate coworkers, I was just like, this isn't me. It's not me. And so I think knowing that I was stuck for that many years, actually making the step and taking action to get unstuck, those were two very different things. And they didn't line up until I was like 29, 30. I think, what finally caused it to line up is I had a really brutal breakup from this situationship that I was in. And I had previously thought of myself as very much someone who was like kind of a catch and kind of like, oh, you're lucky to be talking to me. And then to like have that turned on its head and getting played in that scenario, like it shook me up a little bit. It was like the last final gut punch of my Saturn return. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna move as close to the beach as possible. I'm gonna make space for myself. I'm gonna like slow life down a little bit. And I'm gonna take this time for myself to like figure out what I actually like doing and what I find important. And what's funny enough is that the path it didn't unfold for me until I started genuinely pursuing things that I liked and found interesting. And I think that is like the critical piece of the story, especially, your question, which was like, what point did you start to get unstuck? I think if I really take a look at it, it was that moment where I committed to doing things that I cared about, making the time and space for like what I was really craving internally and honoring that to like get back to myself and figure out a place where I was operating more in alignment with what I actually wanted to be spending time doing. Does that answer your question?
It so does. And
Okay.
that's so unbelievable. I really, really resonate with your story because I think what's so powerful about the human experience and humans in general, I think especially in the spiritual community, it's so common, for folks to say that we always have the answers within. Like we have everything that we could possibly need within. And like people can roll their eyes. I roll my eyes sometimes when I hear that. I'm like, oh, like that just sounds so exhausting. Like I know this to be true, but I also like I don't know at the same time. Like and like I don't know why like this duality of like feeling like we like there's some things that we know, but there's also some things that we don't want to know. And you having that feeling of like knowing that this ain't it at 23. Think back to when you were 23. Like I like my 23-year-old, like she was a child. I'm like she was a kid, right? And so like thinking back and like realizing that the road that society brings us down, when we finally get in there and we get there and we realize that this is not what we're meant to be doing, like that's scary as hell. Then it's like, what do you mean? I just went to college. Like I have these student loans. I have this whole path and like this whole plan and this archetype of like what I was going to do in my brain. And now I have this truth revealed to me that like this ain't it, turns out. What am I supposed to do with this? And like, how am I supposed to navigate this? Which is why like that feeling of fear comes up and we don't acknowledge it until we absolutely have to sometimes. And like it was that journey that you had to move through where it was like, and I love like it's like, oh, like the happy hours that I really resonate. It's like, oh, like I had a corporate card, like I'm traveling for work, like I'm like, look at me. Like they really like it's so funny how we try to convince ourselves of like how good things are, like the good part of the things that we're in, even though like we know. And this is when I was in college. I have a very similar story. Like, because I grew up a dancer, I was always like a creative, and I never knew what I wanted to do besides dance. And then when I was in college and I stopped dancing, I literally just had no idea what the fuck to do like with my life. And I went into business honestly just because it was like for me like an easy major to just like move through. And my dad, he was in marketing and he was like, "Why don't you just like come to my office?" Like, because I was like, I don't want to get dressed up in a suit every day. I'm like, I just want anything. He's like, "Well, Megan, it's like not like that. There's like a bar cart, you like roll it around and like we have office and we have the drinks." And I was like, "Okay, like fine, I'll go." And so like I went to his office and everyone was so nice to me and so sweet. And I was like, like I guess this isn't that bad. And so, and then I roll, and then, then you wind up in it, and then it's like, okay, wait, though I knew that this wasn't it because I didn't know anything else. It's like, of course, we kind of cling on to the things that we know, and we let that ride itself out to the point of, when it does get to be, unfortunately, like bad enough where it's like, well, fuck. We have the break moment for you, it was your breakup. And for me, it was like my overall well-being of being in the shitter of realizing like, no matter what job I go to, because then, then you have the stories of like, oh, well, maybe it'll be better at a different company, or if I'm making more money, or if I move to this city, or this, that, and the third. And like, it's still not really addressing the problem of really like you had that truth. We all know like there's that underlying truth always there, and it's up to us to just acknowledge it and actually have the courage to really admit that maybe we don't know. And that's
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Here's what happens is that whenever you get to your early 20s, what's your life is a reflection of basically the beliefs that you've absorbed your entire childhood, your entire young adulthood. And what's being reflected back at you is the manifestation of you acting out those beliefs in day-to-day life. And so that can look like, for you, it was, your dad had maybe said that a corporate job was the most successful route. And so you pursued marketing. For me, it was like I went to business school because I was like, oh, that makes sense. I'm going to make money from that. But what happens is when you get to like early to mid 20s, I think everybody and we all have this realization, which is like we're shown the curtains kind of pulled back. We're shown that what you're doing now and what it looks like and how it will be projected into the future is a pretty scary image. It's pretty bleak. It entails like you living out your corporate life and just living kind of like an average life. And if you're okay with that, then here's X, Y, and Z distraction to make it feel better. Here's the corporate card, here's the work travel, here's free lunches, here's, free dog sitting at work, here's a 401k match. It's basically enabling you to continue down that path. And I think for me and for you, obviously, and for a lot of people, you get to this point where you realize like, okay, I can either keep going down that route or I can take the harder route, which is untangling all the beliefs that I've absorbed over the years, figuring out what I like to do, my truth, expressing that to the world authentically, and building a life based on that. And that in the immediate term shows not even a fraction of what you were getting out of the predetermined corporate life. But what's cool about it is that if you follow that and you really keep tugging on the thread and figuring out what that looks like and keeping on doing the work, the end result and like 10 years down the road will look infinitely more beautiful than you could ever imagine out of the corporate life and like the predefined life for yourself. It's just this act of having like a little bit of faith that if you bet on yourself and pursue what you find interesting, you pursue what you actually want to be doing, that it'll work out for you because it will. It absolutely will. It just, you have to be willing to put in the work and be patient and eventually see the fruits of that labor. So yeah, that's kind of how I view it.
absolutely. Well, it's almost like like going into this big trust fall, like, but back into yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because I think like that's especially in this time of our life where like, the life is a direct mirror of all of our beliefs and everything that we, were told and thought about ourselves and all of these things. And all of a sudden, like all of these things start to come into question. And when these beliefs start to come into question, we want to look outside of ourselves. We want to look at the evidence. We want to look at something that we can hold on to, whether that's our friends or our family or Instagram, like any like looking to see like, okay, well, like this person looks really happy, or like this person has a lot of success. So like, if they're doing it this way, like I'm on that track. Like this must result in like what I want to be happy and to be successful. And when we keep looking outside of ourselves, that's when we keep really disconnecting from our own truth. And when clients come to me and, they're like, I just feel so lost and scared, and like there's this next chapter and there's so many unknowns, a lot of the time it's because they're not spending enough time actually getting to know themselves, right? We've just molded ourselves to what our parents wanted us to be, or who our friends want us to be, instead of like actually learning how to build a foundation on who we want to be. And so how did you begin to really like build that foundation? I know you mentioned it's like, okay, like I need to move to the beach, like I need to like really rediscover and learn like what I actually like again. Like, what was that process like for you?
Yeah, I also sorry, I don't know if this is just you are so eloquent whenever you talk about these things that I just like got hypnotized. I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And I just like was listening to everything that you were saying and taking it in. But yeah, of course. But yeah, for me, I think um the real turning point was I started to trust that I had it within me to get out of the rut that I was in. And I know it sounds kind of high level, but what that looked like is really finding small pieces of evidence that I had the answers to things that weren't even necessarily questions about myself, but questions about the world. And this looked, these are kind of silly examples, but I'll give two examples where like I noticed the tide really started to shift in this regard, which is, I usually when I watch a movie that I really find interesting, the first thing that I do when I finish the movie is go and Google like the message of it. I like go and Google a review explaining what the concept was to tie it all together. But I remember specifically when I had been on the healing journey for a little bit, watching this one movie, and immediately I was engaged during the entire movie, and immediately I was like, "Oh, this is the message." Like clear as day, I know that that's what I'm supposed to get out of the movie, and I don't even care to go and look what other people are saying about it because for me, that's what the message was. There are just certain tells and certain ways that you can figure out to get back to a place where you're like trusting that you have answers in life. And when you can start doing that externally, like it may be as silly as a movie, but like you start to build the muscle of like trusting yourself and realizing that you actually might have more answers than you think you do. And then whenever you're ready, turning that inward on yourself and really spending time alone to figure out, what are the problems I've been putting off? What are the issues I need to address? What are the things I want to be spending time doing? And just getting to a point where you can trust that even if the answer doesn't immediately come up, you'll get there eventually. That was everything for me. I had always been disconnected from that, but finally figuring out a way to get back to it was a game changer for me. So now, I don't even question if my answer is right or wrong when I'm speaking up in a meeting or I'm like going down a rabbit hole of something to learn. I'm like, I find it interesting. My deepest truth wants to know about this thing, wants to express this thing. Therefore, it can't be wrong. So that's kind of how I reached that point.
I love that. And I love that you also brought up not knowing the answer right away. Because especially in this age that we're living in, where like information is just so readily available. Like we can now AI chat literally anything, we can Google anything. Like there's just information abound, but our brains like are not a computer, right? Like our brains are not a computer. And so it's so natural to like when we ask ourselves these questions, literally the first thing out of our mouth is I don't know. It's like immediate. But then the longer you just let that silence actually happen, the first thing is I don't know, right? But then when you sit with it, you can just more words just start coming out. And maybe it's not the answer quite yet, but it's like, oh, well, like I feel like this and I feel like this. And all of a sudden, when you follow that thread, there actually is the answer and there is the knowing. But it's like this notion of feeling like we always need to like have the exact answer about what we want and how we're feeling. Like in a nanosecond, like our bodies and our brains like don't actually work that way. And so I know for me and my process, it's like silencing the noise, like like taking TikTok and Instagram off of my phone for a while, like even like music, going on long walks where it's like I'm literally just listening to myself and like letting just my own wisdom come through because I don't think we do that enough. And the more that we lean into that, that's actually how we can build those muscles to learn how to trust ourselves. So I think that's like the next question I feel like people ask. It's like, okay, well, like, how do you go about trusting yourself? And it's like, you actually need to give yourself the space to be with yourself first and like love on yourself a little bit.
Totally. Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think what happens is that we get divorced from our intuition at a very early age. We all, I think the ultimate goal is to basically like get back to a point where you're using your intuition to guide you day to day and you're, actually expressing yourself through that intuition. That's spoiler alert, I don't want to jump to the end of the episode, but that's ultimately like whenever you have the most purpose, you're the most fulfilled, you're the happiest whenever you're expressing that deepest truth and that intuition that's inside of you to the world and using it to go about your day. And so I think like for me, knowing that that's the answer is everything. Why wouldn't you just optimize figuring out that one thing? Then all of your problems can be solved if you just move towards that, right? And so what happens is, I think at an early age, we get divorced from our intuition through school because if you think about the first time that you are in, I don't know, elementary or middle school, think about the first time that the teacher called on you in front of class and asked you a question and you tried to answer it with your intuition or you just tried to answer it with whatever came to your mind and you were wrong. And the teacher tells you you're wrong, the class laughs, you immediately shut down, you basically immediately start that process of not trusting yourself. You begin to start putting a filter over all of your thoughts and your intuition of logic of and like figuring out critically thinking, is this the right answer? And then you layer in tests on top of that, pop quizzes, homework, where you have to look at all your problems through a very specific filter of logic to answer them. And so obviously over time, as that gets reinforced for 12 grades and then college, obviously like you're always looking for the right answer in every regard with a logical mind and critical thinking. Um, but all of the answers to these really, in my opinion, the only important things in life, which is like how can you be happy? How can you find your purpose? How can you align yourself with the highest version of yourself? How can I live the life that I want? Those all come from not a logical place. They come from your intuition. So if you can get back to a place where you're intuitive, you're connected to yourself, you understand yourself, you trust yourself, then all of these big, enormous questions in life start feeling a little bit easier to answer. It's just a process of recognizing it and starting to work on it.
Ah, I love that you said that. And because honestly, that answer, like learning how to really understand ourselves and our intuition and how, like, from such a young age, I mean, even for me, like I was seeing ghosts at like the age of 3 to I think maybe like 12, 13. But like, then shit got, then all of a sudden it's like, well, now everyone thinks I'm fucking weird. So I guess I'm just gonna not do this anymore. And like, that when we think of the children and like their imagination and how creative they are and like the storytelling and like all of the like crazy things that we used to do as kids. And then it does get shut down and it does get kind of morphed into needing to be right. And not only needing to be right, but needing to be right in this particular way, right? And like
Yeah.
through this lens. And that's why I love human design. Because in human design, you really get to, and I want to use your example of being the manifester, right? Because for you, you talked about like when I have this like interest and this inkling, and it's like, who am I to like say like no to this thing? Like, of course it's right. And for you, like it absolutely is. Like, I mean, for everyone, like following those little hunches and then using your authority. For you, it's your spleen, using your splenic authority to really feel into like, do I want to continue to light this up? Because you're really here to initiate, you're really here to bring about like change, and you are really here to create anything that you want to create in life. And so you also having this splenic authority, which is so intuitive, by the way, like splenic authorities are always just like, I don't know, I just love them. There's always this like allure and like like just like there's just like a deeper knowing, because it like your splenic authority really houses your intuition and your instincts. And so like you being able to act in the moment and act on your whispers is the most important. And so that's really how you're meant to lead your life. And so like when you had that initial pull to start the podcast, it's like, on our splitting authority, it's like they were like, yes, yes. But like our free will comes in, we're like, okay, we're just like not ready yet. And then, and I think that's what the beautiful thing about the universe and about life is like, we have free will, we have our authority, like we have all these tools that are able to like bring us, but we're never missing out on opportunities. Like we're never, even if like at the moment we're saying no right now, it doesn't mean that we're not able to bring something back, right? And so like you like continuing to like like listen to your whispers, it brought you back to your podcast, and then you were able to come in and like really share all the things that you're here to share. And now how great is your podcast now that you went through all of the human experience that you went through previously, right?
Yeah, I think that's so right. And I love that the way that you just described things, it implies that life just has this innate beauty about it where things will unfold for you even if you make the quote unquote wrong choice. And I think in life, within reason, there's no wrong choice, right? There's just a choice that gets you, further along one path or less far along that path or down a different path. And so I think like giving yourself the grace to make it be okay that you're not taking like necessarily the exact right path all the time is so important. I really agree with that and I love it. I feel like, we just have to follow what we love doing at the end of the day. I just love hearing you talk about the human design stuff because it's just like it's so true. Like whenever you talked about it being a whisper initially that, potentially I ignored, but eventually I came back to it. I think what's also beautiful about that concept is that the whispers, they don't stop ever. They just either they get louder maybe or they get quieter for the time. But they'll always be there. And I think that's really comforting too, knowing that the whispers of what you should be spending your time doing, and how you should be leveling up, like they'll always come to you. I think that's really comforting. So how can you get more in touch with with the whispers that are coming to you day in and day out?
Oh my gosh. Well, as I'm like, now I feel like the questions have been turned on to me.
Sorry. I'm
And
just personally curious.
I'm like, no, like you're just so cute. In your little interviewer self, as I love. But truly, like, I think it's so important to like know that there isn't a right path. Like, and like I think when we allow the pressure of that to actually roll off of our shoulders and realize it's like there is no, again, within reason, I'm not saying to like go murder our families, right? Like there is no right or wrong choices in life. There are just choices. And I think when we get stuck is when we don't make any choice, right? That
Uh,
feeling of stuckness and that feeling of stagnancy is when we are actively not making choices because we're so scared of making the right or wrong choice. But in
yes.
reality, there's always I just see the universe as just like this ebb and flow. And like these paths sometimes like we're going this way, but we come back and we start intersecting and like now we're over here and like it just gets to be this beautiful like web of life, right? Where like as long as we continue to actually make choices, we cannot make a wrong one. It's when we're not making choices at all. And so for me, at least how I've been, getting into like back into my intuition is honestly really understanding my astrology and human design. And on your podcast, which I will plug here, like we all need to go listen to Unstuck because I was also on Ethan's podcast and we dove super deep into his astrology and his human design. But really, I think it's understanding your authority. And for you, especially, it's your whispers. Like it is your initial reaction, how you initially receive and your initial reaction in the moment, like you being as present as possible is so, so, so important for you. And trusting that even though, because especially you do have from your spleen to your throat to your ajna, there is that channel where we do have that perfectionism in place. We are very much in the details, and there's always feels like there's more that we can learn and can be done before like doing the damn thing, right? Like, I'm like, there's so much more to research, there's so much more knowledge. Like, it's like a never ending pool and we can like I have the same channel, so that's why I'm saying we, so we can really like tank like we can really get in the weeds here and like constantly be feeling like and second guessing those whispers, right, that come like because then the whisper comes and then our brain all of a sudden wants to be like, oh, well, like, I have to go do all of this now. And like, do I have time to go do all of this for like like the logic starts to come in and like starts to almost discount the whispers a little bit. But the more like in tune, especially with you like being in your body, going on walks when you're working out, even like I like to think of like shavasana after yoga, like the thoughts that are coming to you, like after you like move your body and like get all of the noise out and you're just in it and you can hear yourself. It's like the most beautiful thing that you can do. And for everyone else here, it's like really like leaning into your own unique strategy and your own unique authority, right? And like for you, it was like realizing as a manifester, like manifestors can be in corporate. I was telling you in the beginning, like before we started recording, like manifestors can really thrive in corporate, but they need to have their own autonomy. Like you need to be able to like work 2 weeks straight, like when you're really passionate, and then like take 2 weeks off and like live your own moment and like really have your own autonomy when it comes to like the projects that you're working on and the time that you're putting in and like really like still being your own boss but like very much like being a part of that team, right? So it's like it definitely can work. But manifestors are really here because y'all are so, it is so on brand for y'all to just be left to your own devices. You're like, because you truly have everything within. You don't need any outside like energy to tell you what to do and how to do it because y'all are here to initiate, y'all are just here to do the thing. And that's why informing and letting people in and your strategy of informing comes so unnatural to you because you're like, I'm like, give me a room and like I can literally get this done, no fucking problem. Like love you, but love me more types of types of vibes.
Yeah.
But it's like the
Mhm.
more you inform, the more you let people in, the more support that you'll be able to receive and actually give yourself a chance to be like, oh, like especially manifestors, you don't need to finish everything that you start. You're not meant to. You don't have that active sacral. So it's like when the more that you inform and you let people in and have people supporting you, that's when you can pass things off and continue to follow those whispers because you're the whispers that you have, you can be so multifaceted. Like, we're really passionate about the podcast one week and then there's this other project that is really calling to you and it's like like now it's like we want to spend all of our energy here. And it's like you can work for like when you're really into something, you can work for like 15 hours straight, but then you need like a week off to like come back to yourself and like be in a moment. It's like, okay, like that was really cute. I'm gonna let someone take it from here. And now I'm
Yeah.
gonna do this and like letting yourself be multifaceted. But I don't even know if that answers the question, but like for me, like that was understanding your human design and how you operate is probably like, I mean, for me, like the key to unlocking, like actually learning how to lead your life.
Totally. Yeah. I'm just like I was mesmerized because everything you were saying was so true. I was like, yeah, literally, if I do a big project at work, I'm like, I don't want to look at work for the next 2 weeks. I want to go do my own thing. I want to go reclaim my space and then having to like then be forced to log back on the next day because it's just the way things are doesn't work in my mind. I'm like, no, I'm gonna like rebel. I don't like that. You know what I mean? And
Yes, a
that's
rebellion is a very manifester of you.
yeah. And then it
Very
comes off,
manifester.
yeah, it comes off as people, I think, thinking that they're like, oh, I notice this weird like ebb and flow of you being interested, and sometimes you're not interested. And I'm like, yeah, because that's probably true. Like I sometimes don't give a shit about what we're talking about, but I still have to be here. I wanted to dive into something that you said, which I think is a broader message for anybody listening. And I think the channel that you spoke about is really important in this topic because one of the components of being stuck in life, to your point, is being at an impasse, not being able to make a decision left or right, not being able to make any changes because everything feels scary. Um, and I think for a lot of people that are potentially like you and me that have that channel of that lens to perfectionism, sometimes we think in our conscious minds that we're doing ourselves a favor by being perfectionist and by planning something out meticulously before we take action. But the underlying subconscious pattern that that's reinforcing and enabling is the pattern of inaction. So you're enabling your stuckness by being a perfectionist because you rationalize not having a perfect plan for something. And that works against you because really the only way to get unstuck is to take action, even if it's super messy and wrong and just all over the place. You kind of have to like fight out of it. Like you're under a crumbled wall of bricks. Like you got to elbow and nudge and like claw your way out of it. You can't do that if you're just thinking about how you're going to get out of that, right? You have to not even you have to be willing to not have a perfect plan and just be willing to take the action to do it. So I think that's so interesting that that perfectionism like can help you but can also hurt you very drastically if you are stuck or you're in a place of comfort or contentness and you're just thinking and thinking and thinking and planning perfectly how do I get out of it. You're enabling yourself. So I would challenge everybody who's if that resonated with you like take a step back and instead of planning more think about what you can do, what step you can take, what action you can take just to explore the way out, just to explore something different than what you're currently doing with your free time.
That is so beautifully said because our brain is such a beautiful thing, but our brain can get really, really tricky. It can really like trip us up, especially when it comes to like that perfectionism and the constant planning. Cause like when you look like throughout your day, for example, and you're like, okay, like I have all these tasks that need to get done in order to like go do this, for example. And so, but when you actually like break down those tasks, like I want everyone to really break down and like really understand it's like, is this task actually moving a needle in any way? Is it actually getting me any closer to getting the job that I want, starting the thing, joining the program, like whatever it is? Like, is it actually getting me to where I want to go? Or is it just making me feel better, like making me feel busy, making me feel productive? Like, it's kind of like almost like this little mask. Like, it's like, oh, well, it's like I've been working on this for like months. Right. It's like people like saying like they're gonna write their book of like, oh, well, like I've been working on this for months and like, been having all my framework and I've been like drafting it out. It's like, okay, but like, have you been writing it?
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's like, no. And then it's like, okay, well, like you let yourself get busy with all these tasks that make you feel like we're moving in the direction, but it's actually really the perfectionism and the need for control and the planning and a little bit of the fear that's kind of actually really in the driver's seat and
Yeah.
really the one making the impasse.
You know where that is, right? It's because and I've done a lot of research on this because that literally was me for the longest time. It's because it's cheap dopamine to talk about what you're doing.
Mm.
If you can convince yourself in your mind that you've done enough to go and tell somebody that's close to you, oh, I'm starting a podcast, I'm writing a book. It sounds really nice. It sounds like you're going to get the reaction like, oh my God, that's amazing. Tell me all about it. You're going to get that reaction. It's going to be a positive feedback loop in your brain. You're going to feel the dopamine hit from that as if you had actually taken action to start the thing that you're talking about. But you haven't. You haven't made the steps to actually make it happen. So that's why I always tell people like move in silence and take action. And you should only be telling people about it in retrospect, like in hindsight, about what you did do, what steps you have taken versus like, oh, versus like taking the shortcut and like cheating yourself from the action and just saying like, oh, I'm planning on doing this or I'm working on doing that. No, just do it, take the action, and then celebrate whenever it comes up organically and someone asks you what you've done in the past to make progress towards it. Don't take the shortcut and tell people, oh, I'm going to the gym 4 times a week, when in reality, like you're planning on doing that starting next week. You know what I mean? Because it's just you're giving yourself a cheap dopamine hit and you're not actually moving the needle.
I feel like my mind was just blown. I've never heard it in like the terms of cheap dopamine, but that is so fucking true.
Yeah.
It's so true because you like really makes you feel like you're already in it and like you're already like moving and shaking and you're doing the things, but in reality, it's like, are you?
Mhm.
Are you?
Yeah.
Or now just like when you keep saying that you're doing it, it makes you feel better. And like the responses that you get, it's like, oh yeah, like this is what I'm doing. And then it's like, okay, where's the podcast girl? Like we've been talking
Hmm.
about this now for like 3 months. It
Totally. And
like it doesn't take that long.
yeah. And you have to, it really is a battle with yourself, right? Like you have to hold yourself accountable because a lot of the times the people that are close to you, like they don't want to hold you accountable because it's uncomfortable and they aren't going to say to your face like, "Oh, well, where's the proof?" How uncomfortable was that conversation, right? So most people they'll say like, "Oh, that's amazing. Tell me more about it." And then in 3 weeks again when they ask like, "Hey, how's it going?" A lot of us default to like using that closeness to not manipulate, but to basically rationalize the fact that we haven't made progress. So we'll say like, oh, I've just been so busy and I really do want to start it still, but like X, Y, and Z happened to me. And oh, can you believe so and so did that? And changing the subject. And you
Mhm.
can like leverage your relationships to enable this like whole system of cheap dopamine that you created for yourself. It's literally a factory, right? At this point, you figure out a way to get that. You figure out a way to not actually take the action to do it. So you have to check yourself whenever, you're just talking. Talk is cheap, action is expensive. So do the harder thing
Oh,
first.
I I really love that. I really, really love that moving in silence. I mean, for you, you do need to inform more. So I will hold you accountable to that. As a manifester, I do need you to form a little bit. But like still, it's true though. Like because I know for me, like when I was leaving my job and I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm leaving my job because I always, especially when we're still feeling wobbly in the things too, like we're still a little scared and we're still like we're not as solid in like the things we're doing. And I would tell people like, oh, I'm leaving my job and like all this, I'd be met with so much fear and like so much like how other people responded to me and I'd be like shocked. I'm like, oh my God, like why is everyone like so scared for me? Like, I'm like, I'm not this scared. Like, I'm like, oh my God, like this is so exciting. But then like those little seeds of doubt starts to get planted in, and then all of a sudden now you're in your own little whirlwind and your own little identity crisis of like, oh my God, like, is this the right decision for me? And it's like the more action that you put behind your words, actually, maybe even having the practice of honoring your word. Like, if you are going to say it out loud, knowing that everything that we say is spells anyway, at least that's what we believe here
I love that. I love a
in
spell.
my world. So, like, when everything, because our voices are frequency, right? And energy is frequency. And so like everything that's coming out of our mouths, like whether it's all bullshit or not, like that's holding a frequency. And so
Totally.
when we actually make the intention of honoring our word, like really watching what comes out of our mouth and holding ourselves, if it comes out of my mouth, like this is the person that who I am, like I am honoring myself and I do the things that I say, then that's the energy that you have to leave with, right? And but then it's a really interesting practice because then you really start to watch what comes out of your mouth and you really
Yeah.
start to become a little, maybe a little bit more quiet. Maybe it's like you're
Yeah.
not like a just like a waterfall of words anymore. And
Well,
that can be a good thing.
totally. Yeah. I mean, one of the pillars of my podcast and just my platform in general is like sharing wisdom that I've learned over the years. And one thing that I talk about a lot, at least on social, not so much my podcast yet, but is about trust. And, you know, I think what's interesting is that I've determined and I've learned over the years that there's only one way to build trust with anybody else. And the same thing rings true for yourself, which I'll get to in a second. But in order to build trust with anybody, how that is built is literally brick by brick. And each of those bricks is whenever someone's actions align with what they say. So whenever action equals words, that's a brick of the foundation. Action equals words, another brick. And that's how you build it up over time, right? It gets to be this wall of trust, this foundation of trust. And so that's the only way that you can actually build that with other people on earth. So the same thing applies for yourself, right? If you're saying one thing, but your actions look different than what you're saying, there's no way that you trust yourself. There's no way that you have that foundation of trust with yourself because if that was true, you wouldn't be moving differently than what you're saying, you know? So I think that's a very interesting tell. If that is something that you do is you move completely different than what you say, then like there's no way that you built that trust with yourself over time because if you're willing to do that and make that distinction between those two paths, then you're okay to break your own trust. And what does that say about you? You know?
Absolutely. And I think that's a mirror that and a value that I don't think we as a society like hold in regard enough, right? Because I think it's just so easy to it's like, oh, like well, I just got busy and this happens and that happens, but it's like no, like actually if we are treating ourselves with the utmost of respect, right? As everyone should be, and treating ourselves like we are truly the most unique, most beautiful, like incredible, spectacular, never been done before human being on the planet, then it's like, what does that what does that say about you? Like, what does you saying we're going to do these things and then not do them? What does that mean when we promise ourselves we're going to take a break and like actually take that vacation and then we don't? What does that say? And I think that's like that's a really hard question for people to answer a lot of the time because it's like, oh, like it really comes back down to like I'm not actually fully leaning into myself and like actually letting myself trust myself, and that's where those like limiting beliefs and those the programming going in the back of our head, like that's where we might not be telling that with words. I'm not saying out loud like I don't trust myself, but that's what the body is picking up on, right? Like that's what our brain is like recording every time we go to do these things and we don't do them. And so like you're just spot on. I can't wait for everyone to come listen to your podcast because you're truly just a manifester really living in his purpose. And I just absolutely love that. I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast today and just sharing your story because, like, it's just so beautiful. You have so much to share.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be my first interviewee ever. So I'm excited for everyone to listen. And, you know, I I'll also plug Megan here a bit because I think that, if you're anything like me, you have a tendency to be humble, but truly like even in just the few like minutes here and there between both of our episodes where you've like turned the mirror on me and been basically a voice of like human design and astrology, I have learned and put connected so many dots just in those brief little insights and wisdoms that you share with me about myself. And I just like am totally in awe of like your powers and just your general aura. I feel like it's just so beautiful. And I feel like now that we both reconnected from a place of like being more authentically ourselves and expressing ourselves and sharing ourselves with the world, it feels just like even more special than it did at our corporate job when we worked together a few years
Oh my
ago.
God, yeah. I'm like, oh my God, it's finally nice to meet you. I feel the same
Yes.
way. I'm like, I feel the same way about me too. I'm like, especially with connecting with people in the past, I'm like, they're like, oh my God, how have you been? I'm like, I feel like I'm a whole new person coming to you
Literally.
right now in this moment. But thank you so much. Truly, that's so kind. And I'm so happy that, these tools can bring about just deeper awareness for you. And, that's why I just love them so much. Like they're incredible. And so please plug all of your things right now. How can people find you? How can people connect with you? All of that.
Yeah, you can find me on Apple and Spotify and anywhere you get your podcasts. My podcast is called Unstuck. Every week I interview guests, family, friends, colleagues, experts on the process of getting unstuck, finding your purpose, finding your most authentic life. And you can find me on Instagram at Ethan Grant Mark. I'll also include that tag in the show notes. So yeah, I would just love for anybody to come along the journey with me and reach out if you're feeling stuck or need any sort of help in finding your purpose. I feel like that's what I ultimately have decided is what I'm here to do on Earth. So yeah, thank you so much for having me today.
Yay! Yay! Just like having that, I just like love seeing people. It's like, yeah, no, like this is actually like what I'm here to do. And I'm just like, yes, like it's just so it's worth its own celebration. And for this being your first, which I didn't even realize, being your first like interviewee, you did incredible. You were amazing. I'll put it all
Thank
in the show notes, but thank you so much. Everyone go find Ethan, follow him. He's literally such a gem. I can't wait for y'all to be obsessed with him as much as I am. And we'll all talk soon. Thank
thank
you.
you so much. I appreciate it. All right, bye everyone.
Bye. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode as much as I did. Thank you so much for being here. You have no idea how much it means to me to be able to connect with you all in this way. I would love it if y'all could rate and review the podcast. It helps me so much. If you do, feel free to send me a screenshot on Instagram or emailing me directly. I would love to send you a special gift from me to you that you can use in any offering that's in my world. Remember to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Megan and Bound. And until next time, I'm sending you all of my love.